How ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Kittim, it is revealed to them. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that pass over the sea have replenished, and by great waters the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river is her revenue.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing today in the book of Isaiah, chapter 23. We started on 23 on Friday, and we only really got through the first verse because I had a couple other subjects on my mind. It was an interesting talk, but I didn't want to take up any real time going over too many of the details of the first verse and try to keep to that. The burden of Tyre, howl ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Kittim it is revealed to them. So we talked about the nature of what ships of Tarshish are. Mercantile ships going to the far reaches of the sea. Perhaps, some people say perhaps Spain. We won't go further into it than that, because it's not particularly important as far as that goes. It's a place far off that was, and that was the ships were named for that place. Like in the East India Trading Company. Oh, we got East India ships coming in. They had Tarshish ships coming in. And that was Solomon's time when that came to be. And we read about that from Kings. So, Kittim, again, the name means bruisers. But it's, I always caution people against the assumptions of that names are the key to understanding things. The problem being, though, sometimes there's some passages in the Bible where a proper name is translated, or there's some question as to whether it should be translated as a proper name or as a word. Meaning, like, say, oh, Mr. Kittim here, that makes sense, but it's like maybe there's a context in which you wanted to refer to a bruiser or whatever, and you would use that word. And there was no distinctive way in Hebrew to offset proper names. Like we capitalize them in English to make it a very apparent, we make it more apparent that way. I gotta go into all the kinds of examples unnecessary. So the laying waste of Tyre, that there's no house, no entering in, no gateway, my history on Tyre isn't totally clear, but I do know that Alexander the Great built a causeway out to Tyre so that he could conquer it. Or was that the Persians? There were several attacks on Tyre over time, and he could either be referring to, and maybe the Persians. I don't know how it went with the Assyrians in that. Tyre's instinct often would be to make peace with the power in the region, but depends on what the terms of those peace are. We'll accept you as king is one thing, but hand over all our gold. Well, merchant cities don't like handing over all their gold. Be still, you inhabitants of the isle being Tyre. Thou, whom the merchants of Zidon, that pass over the sea, have replenished. It was Tyre and Zidon. They were sister cities. Tyre was the rock, and the word Tyre means rock. And place names have a meaning like that because they're like, oh, it's the rock. We'll call it rock. And the land of Kittim, it's the land of they may have called themselves, well, we're the bruisers. That's fine. People often give themselves interesting names. They often give the places they go names that make sense of that place. When people talk about, I live in a rural location, and I kind of fancy sometimes thinking like, what would this place be called? And I'm like, well, probably Toad Hill, because it seems like a lot of toads live and breed on my hill. It's not very fancy, but I couldn't think of a more appropriate name. You know what I'm saying? It's not glorious. It's just what it is. Now, if someone were to later on take it and, it might have a deeper meaning. Sometimes, the fact that Jerusalem means peaceable habitation, yeah, it's like in a certain context where it's talking about peace in the language of Hebrew, the fact that they recognize that that name had that force would have had impact. But a lot like in English, it's like not always. You know what I mean? Sometimes, like, President Bush is hiding in the bushes. I mean, that they're the name and the meaning. It's not a particularly good joke or point. It's just you can see there's a play on words that only in English would you see the poor attempt at, that wasn't even an attempt at humor, just the not very funny use of his name in the context of what it means as a word, and that's fine. But like I said, whatever. I always just urge caution about that, just because it's a way to waste time. Not waste, but all I'm saying is I could fill up the study talking about the words, and it's boring. I used to do that. Like, no, let's look at each of these words. And I do it anyways, but I do it just in a different spirit, I guess, which I think is acceptable to me and makes it worthwhile. Because I know it's a temptation. Thou whom the merchants of Zidon, the pastor with, I don't know what Zidon means, I forgot. Tyre and Zidon, it's just the name of the place as far as I'm concerned. Right now, it's not key to understand this, because the point is not so much about the name of the place. The Tyre is built on a rock, and its name means rock, is not a significant thing. You can say, well, it's not our rock, and that's true. But like I said, you can be right without being right. Meaning you can say things that are true about the Bible and about reality. You can say all kinds of true things like, whatever. I don't know why I struggle to bring up it now. It happens all the time in the study, right? Where, you can be unsure of the meaning of the passage, but you have an idea that is correct. But it's not the same as understanding the passage. And we want to understand the passage. It's not enough to just speak truth over the Bible. To have a bunch of confusing verses and we're going to read them, and then I'm just going to speak things that happen to be true over them. That could be sometimes that's even tempting, because I'll just read the Bible as we're studying here and I get inspired to just talk about something just that happens to pop into my head because it reminded me of that by some strange convoluted chain of logic, or not even logic, just of associations maybe. And that's not really learning. I mean, we might be learning about being Christians, and I hope I have some wisdom to pass on like that, but I want to understand the passage. So, and by great waters, well, be still, ye inhabitants of the isle. Let's focus on the meaning. There is tumult among men. A trouble. Things come. Oh, what's going to happen? Oh, what are we going to do about this? We got healthcare. We got this issue. We got that issue. Men are always up in arms about one thing or the other. And the call from God, be still, peace. You whom the merchants of Zidon, the pass over the sea, have replenished. Because the island of Tyre out there in the ocean was somewhat isolated. It needs supply and stuff. It was a very secure, Tyre being this island out at the sea that was like fortified, not easily assailed. And that was the point. They wanted a city that could not be easily sailed, and they had their ships out there, and they could dock at the sea, bring things in. It's a great idea for a city. It was around for a long time. It was a Phoenician-dominated thing, because the Phoenicians were the sea power, and the sea people even. In fact, that's what they were often called. The harvest of the river is okay. They have replenished. They have filled you up with trade goods, supplies, and by great waters, the seed of Sihor, and probably Zidon came first and then Tyre, right? We had the city of Zidon on the sea, and staring out at that rock. They're like, hey, let's build a city out there. So there are two cities, the one really fortified one, and then the one off the old city. I think that's how. I mean, that's just. I mean, you wouldn't build on the rock and then. Well, you might look because the city on the rock exists there. But it sounds like Zidon gave birth to Tyre the way they put it here. So I don't know. Be ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea. I'm sorry, by great waters, the seed of Sihor. Sihor, I believe, is another name for Egypt or the Nile. I think I read that years ago, but it's not clear on my mind. The seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river, is her revenue. Yeah, I think that has something to do with the grain of Egypt and the harvest of Egypt, because the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, often had a very abundant supply of grain. You look in the book of Genesis, when when Joseph was in charge, there were 7 years of abundance, and Egypt could have very abundant harvests because harvest with the yearly flooding of the Nile and the good rains, the soil was rich, and there could be very abundant harvest, and they have an excess, and they would sell and trade. The granaries of Egypt supplied many other nations from time to time, and also in her own need during times of famine. Obviously, during the Egyptian famine that is described in Genesis, they didn't have enough, so it can go badly. There was a famine everywhere at that time, according to the book of Genesis. Sihor, verse 3. Where are my bifocals? Here we go. My grandpa glasses. It's just so nice. I don't have to peer over them all the time. Sorry about the sniffing. Whatever. I have no handkerchief. All right. So, seed of Sihor. Sihor is the Black River, that is the Nile, compared to Jeremiah 2:18. I'm not going to go to Jeremiah 2:18. Oh, well, I just flipped to it accidentally, so why not? Let's see, Jeremiah 2:18, does it have Sihor also? What has to do in the way of Egypt to drink the waters of Sihor? Oh, that's interesting, yeah. Here, Jeremiah 2:18, and now what hast thou to do? Speaking of the Israelites at this time were seeking to Egypt for help and relief against the Babylonians, I believe. And they would seek to go down to Egypt very often in their trouble. The Israelites would, because they were a natural ally. Anything coming from the north, they'd look south and say, hey, Egypt, as soon as they get done eating us, they might come for you. So maybe you'd like to have some mutual defense. But then on the other hand, Egypt is in a better defensible position. Even so, not always as much as they might think. So it's what hast thou to do in the way of Egypt to drink the waters of Sihor? And what hast thou to do in the way of Assyria to drink the waters of the river? Meaning their river, the Tigris. Because Nineveh was on the Tigris. The Tigris and the Euphrates being those twin rivers that run through that area of the Mesopotamian. So Sihor means the Nile. The seed of Sihor being probably reference to the grain of Egypt. In fact, they said the harvest of the river. A mart of nations. Where we also compared Tyre to Babylon in Revelation, where we have the mercantile aspect of Satan merged with the sort of Babylonian religion aspect of prophecy. Because there's a kind of if you remember in the book of Daniel, when there's a intense religious sort of testing that goes on. Will you worship other gods, bow down to the images, and and so many throughout so much of the Jews' history, their problem was that so many of the people were bowing down to idols, from the days of Moses and the golden calf to the days of when Hezekiah put out the house of the Sodomites from the temple, whatever that meant. Was it? I think it was Hezekiah. I forgot, or maybe it was Amos. I forgot. But but that's a period of their history to the time when their nation's falling apart, and they're still doing things that are forbidden by God in the law, and also that just are obviously immoral, like all the injustices of their society that the prophets talk about. The abuse of the widows and the fatherless and all that, and the enslaving of their countrymen, etc., etc. So Babylon represents a sort of religious corruption, and you have in Revelation the great whore. She is Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, and the harlotry being another reference to, in the spirit, worshiping of other gods is like whoredom or adultery in certain passages where that kind of an analogy is drawn out in many places in the Bible. That's why she is mother of harlots. There are passages to which that is a reference, and when she says, well, and in her is all this merchandise, right? And the merchants of the earth weep and wail over her when she is destroyed, because of all the loss of their merchandise and all the richness that was brought forth because of her, because of all the costliness of all the things that was going on. It's just like whenever, and people point to different things. People say America is Babylon. It's like, I see why people point to all these different things, and it's like a lot of things. I don't know if it is the proper Babylon of Revelation, but to compare the two is not wrong. Like to compare America to Babylon is not a bad comparison to make as far as just as a exercise, because it's like a warning to let us know, when we start comparing and looking at things in the Bible and saying, "Hey, that reminds us of our nation," that's not good. It doesn't mean it's the end, but it means that things that are attributable to Satan in the worst time that the world could ever possibly see are happening even in our times. You know what I mean? When you see things that are like the book of Revelation, it doesn't necessarily mean you're in the book of Revelation, but what it means is you're living in bad times that are like the times in the Revelation. Like I said, when you're living in a time when you can't buy or sell unless you're wearing a mask, loosely, obviously, this is not, but enough so that you can actually draw the comparison. Because there is a comparison. I remember I did that thing on the Mark of the Beast where people were like, "This is not the Mark of the Beast." It's like, I'm not saying it is, buddy, but if you don't see the similarities, you've got your eyes closed. You know what I mean? If you can't see, like, wow, that's if that isn't fascinatingly, if you're too busy dismissing it so as not to cause a panic, you're part of the problem. You're just manipulating people. That's what they did. They manipulated people out of hate for one man, really. Not one man, actually, out of hate for the whole country. It's not the president they hated, it's you. Anyone who voted for someone like that, that's who they hate. That's who they hate and despise. They didn't want to honor our choices. And the government thinks it's some sort of independent thing. It's gone rogue. That's what's happened. It's been on, but the thing is, it's happened a while ago. What it is they saw their power threatened, and they freaked out and exposed themselves. And they can't put that back. So in some ways, I do think either the end is coming or their days are numbered. Because it's usually one way. The end is coming for somebody. There's always an end coming. Always an age ending and a new age beginning. It doesn't have to be the end of the world for something traumatic to happen. Look what happened in the year 1000. Have you ever studied history? You should study history. This isn't a history class, and I'm not a historian any more than I'm a scholar of the Bible. I mean, I'm a student of the Bible in the loose sense, but in the sense that scholars are meant, it meant, people with the tall caps and robes and degrees and all that sort of thing. People whose hands don't look like these. Not that they look that great or that bad. Not that my hands are that hard working, to tell you the truth. I mean, I know there's dudes with real bad hands. But, the point is they've never touched a hard thing in their life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because thinking can be hard business, right? It's not a, and also it's, as someone who does both, who works hard and thinks hard, I do find the physical labor to be much more, no matter how hard it is, it's different, much different. I'd rather work hard with my body because it's more peaceful. Because when you work hard with your body, your brain's free to just meditate and pray. But when the world is just stuffing your head full of things you got to think about and consider and calculate and analyze, it's hard to pray in the midst of all that. It's hard to be mindful of the Lord in the midst of all this mental assault. That's why I think in this world, the most perilous thing about our times is we don't have, in the old days, the struggle for existence was really a physical struggle. You get out there and you get your, most people were out there dirty, looking for food, scrounging for food. They're taking care of their crops. It was a very struggle for existence. And now people got all these things bombarding them like, should I still remain the same gender? And the only way you could possibly think about that is if you would stop thinking about things like, will I eat tomorrow? And your body being involved in all those activities, it freed your mind to meditate on the Lord. But in our society, our brains are really the thing under assault. Our bodies are all flabby and useless. We're all sitting around. I'm in pretty decent shape right now. I'm pleased with my weight. But the thing is, it's like I've lost weight before, and the struggle to stay. It's funny that we struggle not to get fat. Like, that's a struggle. Then that's weird. It should seem weird. We gotta fight not to get all fat because we'll just, you know what I mean? It's not a joke at all. Very few people don't struggle in some way or have to do something to prevent it. It's a sign of the society we live in. We're bombarded with entertainment, with merchandise, and all the entertainment, it is merchandise. Because so much of it is not obvious, like, when it's advertised and stuff, you don't realize you're being made merchandise of it all the time. You kind of know. I hope we all realize that, right? The people we're being sold to. And the selling, that being in a society of selling and not selling, everyone's got to buy and sell, but of, what's the word I want? Materialistic, the passion for those things. It's not so much that, hey, we all got to buy and sell, we got to trade. There are desirable things, there are things that are wanted in trade. There's food, there's clothing, there's jewels and all that other stuff. There's merchandise, sure. And that, that is one of the chief distractions for people from religion, from the Lord, like that. And it's, and it always becomes, it's like the excuse. It's like, well, I have so many important things to do, so I don't have time for God. Not that God needs the time, but you need to take time to be with God, to foster a relationship with God. Because like I said, I don't want to show up on the day of judgment and there'll be any question in my mind that God is going to know exactly who I am. He should have some inkling. If I go up and he doesn't recognize me, you think about it. Why the hell would I expect him to recognize me? Why the hell would anyone expect him to recognize them? He's God. We're like insects. There have been billions of us. That he would notice one? Anyone in particular. Not me, like, oh, me, but just like that he would know about each of us. Like, that he would bother to know each of us seems ridiculous on the face of it. It just does. If we weren't talking about God, who is much beyond my comprehension. As far as like, I can talk about God in words that we don't, I've told, that on some level for people, are ideas that are beyond our ability to mentally really wrap around. Like eternity. We like the idea of eternity, but we don't know have any idea what that's like. I know I had a beginning. I kind of remember when I noticed that things had started. You don't right away, but somewhere around 4 or 5, all of a sudden you notice and you start remembering. Let's move on to verse 4. This might be a good moment to do it. Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children, neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. And I'm talking about like children a bit, or about society and stuff. Be ashamed, Zidon. The sea is spoken. The strength of the sea. This is what the sea says. I don't travail and bring forth. The sea doesn't trouble itself. It doesn't foster. It doesn't suffer to bring forth children like people do, obviously, by contrast. People travail. They go through things. They bring forth children, to pass things on to teach, to be their heirs, and just because. But the sea has none. No love, no trouble. It doesn't it troubles itself, but it does not trouble itself to bring forth children. It has no feelings. It's impersonal. I don't nourish up young men or bring up virgins. The sea is a very harsh mistress. It's not a place to bring up kids or virgins, young girls. Again, that's not necessarily technical. It's probably I wonder if that's the same word. Let's look at that. As long as I know in Isaiah there's some controversy about the word virgin, especially we talked about a virgin shall conceive. And the simple of it, if you don't remember that, is basically, hey, Mary, the word they use for virgin in Isaiah there, does not explicitly mean a woman who'd never been with a man. It just meant a young lass, like it could be like a 13-year-old girl. That's the kind of age range the word referred to. But, a 13-year-old, it's only, I don't question the virginity of young girls. I mean, even in our society, I guess you could, because it's become so sexualized. But like generally a girl that age is assumed to be a virgin. It's a young girl. When you say a girl, when you use that word, it's not specifying virginity, but it's implying, right? And now here, I was sure virgins here is Bethula. I'm sorry. Virgin shall conceive, and it'll tell me right here if it's the same word actually. Let's use the Englishman's Concordance on the right. Oh, I got to bring this up for you. Sorry. Sometimes I forget that actually requires a bit of engineering on my part. So we have Isaiah 23. So it's not the same word. This is the technical word for virgin. Bethula, a virgin. Maidens, virgin, maiden, whatever. Okay. Wait a second. Not feminine, compared to, also Batu. Okay, whatever. That's I don't get too into the Brown Driver Biggs because I don't know how to use it. And you should never mess too much with a tool you don't understand. Or you should take the time to learn it, right? Well, because a lot of it requires you to look at, if you look at that, look at it. There's Arabic here. I can't read that. And I guess it's annoying to me to try to go through something that I probably should learn how to read. The lexicon entry. Because that's the Brown Driver Briggs. That's a lexicon. It's not the same as a dictionary. It's much more, much more information for a scholar. This is not a scholarly study. Because if it had to be, it might not happen. Get a scholar to do this. You know, do they have the patience? Sorry. When people are critical, it's like, I know. But the cool thing is nobody has to watch, and nobody's paying for this. So, but I appreciate all the time people spend. I want to use it well. Okay. Isaiah, the prophets, depends on the subject. The prophets can be this very, you're going through a lot of interesting material, and there can be a lot of things to say. For me, sometimes that is it. It's the more mystery, the more just what could it mean? There's so many impressions I get. Like the idea of, the sea not bringing up young men or virgins. I mean, that sense of like the coldness of that mistress. I mean, it makes me think of everything I've ever read about seafaring life, like 2 years before the mast and stuff like that. It's a harsh life. And the sea is a harsh thing. And symbolically in prophecy, the sea often represents people. And it's like that. People are also like society is harsh, unforgiving. You know what I mean? It can be like the sea. You know what I mean? It's like you're just one person in the wash of all that humanity, and you just don't matter to the rest of it. You know what I mean? Just like, there's so many times. I mean, I've watched over, sometimes I get interested. I've told my kids, I joke, I have a collection of depressing folk music. And that's kind of a joke, but it's not that I like depressing, but I've always had an interest in songs about disasters, like everyone about the Cumberland mine disaster, the wreck of the Edmunds Fitzgerald. There's a famous old song that, not that old, but I mean from the 60s, about a disaster, right? And I enjoy those kind of things. And I watch disaster things, like videos I've seen, just interested in it. And a lot of times there's these stories like, there's like some of the old times when there'd be like a fire in a place, in a crowded place. And the way people would just run over each other and people would just get trampled and crushed. And it's like, in certain situations, like this, in crowd situations, people, like the idea of the sea being like people is not just an accident. People in large quantities behave like a kind of fluid, especially when they get in motion. Like if you send 1,000 people to go through a doorway that only fits one person, you can use the physics that govern the motion of fluids to actually predict the motion of the people. For a fairly, and you'd be fairly accurate as far as, other than there's gonna be outliers, but for the most part, people are so. What would I say? They just. Well, we're just not particularly. We are individuals, but man, sometimes we're just a big thing. Or we can be. Mindless, just like an army. Losing all your individual identities to give it over into one, to create that power. Like the sea has power. Like a crowd has power. It's a fearsome, terrible power. It's the same power that like I said, that's the same power that's going to make the mark of the beast happen. The whore rides the sea. In the book of Revelation, she's the waters which thou sawest, where the woman sittest, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And it's interesting that the sea is an analogy for all that, and and they go by what they use the sea as their highway to bring about the merchandise, and so the sea becomes also intimately connected with going about and trading with people. I mean, it's such as a natural analogy that it just the correlations just come into being. And it's like, and it's something with society in whole. And society doesn't nourish up young men or bring up virgins either. It doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes a village to F one up. Okay? The village will screw up your children. That's for sure. Okay, that's my opinion about what a village takes. That's why I homeschooled my kids, because I don't trust the damn villagers. I don't trust the raising your children to the village or the sea. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people, they put their kids in homeschool. I mean, they put their kids in school and they say they can't. They'd love to, they can't. And it puts me in mind of people who tell me things like, well, I'd love to help out, but I can't. Because everything I have is all set aside for my vacation next year. Everything I had is set aside for my retirement. I was like, okay, you can't. I covet no man's goods. But the point is, it's like you put limits on yourself a lot of times. And I don't want to shame it. I don't want to put burdens on people. I'm a burdened person myself. Like mentally, I have burdens on myself. The things I have to do, the things I've got to, unless God give me a way out, there's just a lot of obligations I have to Him. And of course, there are people around me. I can't get around those. I can't get around the obligation to my children. And that's why it's a hard thing for me to say. When you say, oh, I'd like to homeschool, but I can't. Why is that can't? It's always money. It's like, well, you know what? I couldn't either, but then I just decided to make do with less. And to suffer. And to be in doubt often. And to just learn to trust the Lord. As I was saying to someone yesterday, someone said, yeah, lack of money is always the problem. And I'm like, oh no, that's not the problem. It's lack of faith. Because here I am. I haven't lost a thing. Apparently there was always enough money to get me here. You know what I mean? And if I need more money, it'll probably be in place to get me to wherever I'm going. And all the worrying and all the troubling I ever did about money was a total waste. Because in the end, the worrying never got anything done anyways. It's like the troubling my heart about it never got anything done anyways. So what was the point? There was no point. The point was just, it was all in vain. That's why it's like, because the Lord is there, because God is there. People think they pray in vain, but they worry in vain. They could pray in hope, in expectation that God would do something because He is there. I know this. You know what I mean? You pray to a living God who is there and who can answer and may. Doesn't always answer, obviously. Because oftentimes our questions are not, a lot of the questions we have for God, we want immediate, from God, we want this special treatment. I mean, I do. I won't lie. I want God to treat me special. I don't mean like I want to be special so much as I want the treatment that's special, because the regular treatment kind of sucks. I don't want God to be silent to me and me have to figure everything out. And not that we do, but He guides us in a subtle way that makes it not so easy to feel like we're being guided until you're used to it after a while, and then you start having greater faith because you see the gentle hand of the Lord guiding you, as opposed to His heavy hand, Him descending and like, let me tell you all about everything right now, Johnny. I'm gonna give you the straight dope right from the horse's mouth. God here speaking, and get you like, wow, people want that. And you say, well, why not? Well, the Lord has ordained to do it this way, that through faith and through the trial of faith. It's not that, like, I remember in the movie, and I make movie references, I don't know if that's bad or good, but I was, unlike a lot of people, I don't get offended in movies that are somewhat pushing at Christian thought or Christianity. Because a lot of what Christianity is currently, I push at and question and also poke at. And I remember that movie by what's his name? The guy from Monty Python who never used to appear on camera, whatever. It was the one with the Time Bandits. There we go. And one of the things is when they were talking about the problem of evil, well, it had something to do with free will, but there was another thing like about faith. Yeah, if you knew for sure, then it wouldn't be faith. That was always, not just in that, but in a lot of stuff I got from England. I think it was a Church of England thing. The Church of England at some point must have said, like, someone must have come up with a brilliant argument that, if you had proof God existed, well, then it would destroy faith. That's not true. Because if you had proof that God existed, you'd still have to believe it. People don't understand this. Because things are proven all the time that people don't believe. Like there's proof that the earth is flat, round. Oh, I know some people believe it's flat, but it's pretty well, I think there's a lot of reasons to believe that it is a big globe in the sky, all right? I don't see any reason why not. I'm sorry if anyone else does. Would you disagree? Fine. I don't take it as a biblical issue. Some people do, actually. And that's fine. Because you know what? The writers of the Bible thought the earth was flat. And so they talk in that's how their language is. They don't have English. They don't have our modern words. They use the words that made sense. And so when they talked about the earth, it was flat. Because you know why? It's like a lot of things. God doesn't specially reveal things to us that we can that he's put on. You know what I mean? It's like if I go, God, what's 2 plus 2? Please reveal it to me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Or some big, God, 563 times 24. 563 times 24. What's the answer, Lord? And it seems silly, right? Why? Because, well, we know we could, 523 times 24 is not easy, but, maybe I can't do it in my head, but I could do it in my head, but I'm not going to try to be a trick pony here. I mean, with a piece of paper, I could pretty easily figure it out, though. I could scratch it out without sweating. I wouldn't even have to hardly try. In my head, I'd have to try a bit. I have to focus. I mean, who doesn't have to focus to do a little head math, right? But I'm trying to think why I was talking about that. You do it in your head. Well, the things they said the Lord helps those that help themselves. That's not scripture, right? I don't believe in that. But it's not that. But the truth is, God doesn't do stuff for you that you could do for yourself. That's a more truthful thing. It's not in the Bible per se. Maybe not directly. I mean, but I could give you indirect examples, like the parable of the talents. God gives talents, and then he expects them to do stuff with it. There is a component that they supply. And that one of them who had the one talent and hid it in the earth, at the end of it, he was rebuked strongly and cast into outer darkness, where there's wailing and grinding teeth. So, that is a very stark reminder that, no, there is something to be done, right? We don't just fold our hands and wait around for God to act. That if it's within our power to do it, we do it. You know what I mean? So when I pray, I'm looking for praying to things that I can't affect, change, or that I need God's assistance. And that made me more likely to see the result, and I'm not wasting his time. If I pray about my bills, I'm going to pray about God, give me the peace to trust you that there's going to be enough money and things will work out, the jobs will be there, blah blah blah. I'm just throwing everything in that I could think of. This whole thing started out though having to do with school. I'm talking about money there, and it's fine. But that's the thing, is like, you want to homeschool your kids, but we don't trust the Lord enough to step out and risk things. You know what I mean? I can pray for my kid going to the school. And fine, but it's like, and there's nothing, hey, you know what? In times past, I would have said, hey, you know what? And I have said, you send your kids to school. I went to school, and it will imperil them. But you gotta sometimes trust the Lord and just be strong and believe in yourself and the way you raise your kids. Believe in yourself meaning believe in the Christianity you're teaching them, if you're teaching it well. But they're not necessarily, they're going to be that's going to be challenged in school. When you give them over to other people, when you give them over to the world, it doesn't bring up virgins, man. Your daughters going to the public schools aren't going to be virgins. Some will, but it's not going to be because of the school. I guarantee that. You know what I mean? Your virgin daughter is because she's conscientious and good-hearted and she listens to her mom and dad and blah. That's why she's a virgin. Not because of the school. There's nothing going on there to helping virginity stick around. Yeah, living in the world is not going to bring up a virgin. You know, it's not going to nourish up a young man in the way he ought to go. It's going to corrupt him. It's going to seduce him with corruption. And that's what schools are like, in my opinion. I mean, think about it. It's a totally new invention. The idea of schooling children is a modern idea. And who is to say that all our modern mental problems and all this stuff, maybe it's all created by school? I don't know. People have happy memories. You know, here's the thing. School works good for some kids. Some kids it doesn't. You know why? You know how I know? Because they go shoot the hell out of those schools. And I know why. I know why. Oh, why do they, I know why. I mean, a lot of times it is, I remember watching that one dude down in Florida's video. It's like, obviously it's like really a disgusting, looking for attention sometimes. But still, why do they want attention? Why the school? People shoot up schools so much. Why is it school shootings? And churches too, I guess. They inspire hatred. That's why. They inspire deep hatred. I hated school. There were other people I knew. When I think back on certain characters in school that I saw as in the really dark end of things, boy, they must have hated school. And I'm glad that they didn't shoot our school up. But the schools create the school shooters, okay? They say, oh, the parents at home. It's like, yeah, I know. The parents aren't raising their kids at home. They're being raised at school. Well, they need to do something at home. It's like, yeah, I agree. But see, you've told them because the school, you understand when your kid's there most of the time and you're working, you come home and it's like, how do you form a relationship like that? Well, you do the best you can. Well, here's the thing. That's the thing is if your kids are going to school, you got to work that much harder because it's not going to raise your child. You can't give your child, if you give your child over to be raised by the world, you're going to have a little sailor on your hand with a mouth and morals to match. You know what I mean? Parents who disconnect from their kids and allow their kids to be raised by their peers in school end up with kids who are, covered in tattoos and piercings and more concerned about their friends than about what their parents think. You know? And if that's what you want for your kid, by all means, just give them over to the school. And don't you get involved in their life at all. Just trust the school is going to take care of it. Come home. When they tell you they're having trouble, you be sympathetic and blah, blah, blah. Just get it going. So, hey, because, you're going to Disneyland next year and you're going to get a bigger house in 3 years. It isn't that exciting. And when it's all over and your child hates you, you know what I mean? It's not always the case, right? I don't hate my parents at all for putting me in school. So, I don't think so. But here's what I would say, though. A lot of people have trouble with their teenagers. My parents had trouble with me. Here's the thing. It's like, I didn't hate them because they put me in school, but they probably felt like I hated them because I didn't want anything to do with them. They were embarrassing. It's like, I had peers I cared about, not my parents. This isn't a funny thing. It seems off track, but it's actually. I'm still every time I look up at that verse, I'm like, yeah, I'm still talking about the same thing. Because while it's true of the sea, like I said, this is. I don't know if he's talking about this, but as an analogy, it's so true in so many ways. It's like parents, you got to raise your children. You've got to take hold of that. You can send them to school, but you have to make the extra effort. You got to understand they're away from you for most of their life. If you don't really work on that relationship, you won't have a relationship because they're in a tough spot and they've got to make their way in the world at school and there's all kinds of pressures and stuff. And then, some kids handle it great, but by definition, because of what it is, some kids are always not. It's just like at Harvard, there's always the bottom half of the class. There's always the bottom half of the class. Always. In every endeavor, there's a bottom half. And who fills it out? Well, what they do is actually they bring in people who are not supposed to be that, who are going to just come into the class and just barely squeak by. but they're athletes and other things that, they actually do that. Literally in these, you know why? Because they would accept all these really brilliant kids who would then be crushed at being the bottom half of the class at Harvard. You know what I mean? Like, though at another school they might be the top. Because there's always a bottom. And who ends up there? Because like I said, the jock who is used to just being coasting by, but not a stupid guy, but but maybe not quite Harvard material, but he can kind of squeak by. That guy somehow makes it because they've planned. Well, because they plan like that. I'm gonna get to feeling that. Okay, so as at the report of Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Well, just the report, meaning the news. News is always an important thing. News comes. Watchman, what do you see? A chariot and a couple of horsemen. What do they say? Babylon is fallen, is fallen. We have then the chapter concerning just Burden of the Valley of Vision, wasn't it? Or, whatever. The desert of the sea. When the report comes, the information, suddenly we know, oh, our city, they hear, that moment when you hear, you ever receive bad news? It's not so obvious. We hear this, it's like, imagine someone calls and is like, your husband's been in an accident. That kind of thing. Because we listen to these ancient tales of cities falling, and imagine being far away, and you get a report. Tyre's been burned to the ground. And that's where you left your wife and children, to go on your latest voyage. The merchants of Zidon. You left your wife and your kids back at home at Tyre, thought safe. Went on one of your journeys, and then you heard a report. Oh, you know what happened last spring? Because, obviously news travels in the ancient world a little differently than it does today. Last spring, Tyre was sacked. You're in a port somewhere and you hear of it. And boy, you're not going to be home for 6 months. Talking about pain, not knowing. And then you get there and you find out, worse than you knew. Pass you over to Tarshish. Go. The Tarshish ships went. Tarshish was like the extent of their journey. So they would go on a journey trading all the way to Tarshish, and then they would return. So there were Tarshish ships because that was the end point of the journey. Saying go. Pass you over to Tarshish, to the farthest reaches of what you do. Howl, ye inhabitants of the isle. Is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Have you heard a report of Tyre? What happened to your families there? Is it burned on the sea, and there was no escape, and people in flames hurled them into the sea? I'm just using my imagination. Imagining a city built on the sea burning to the ground. But whatever. They're not all dead. Is this your joyous city, whose antiquity of ancient days her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn? Taken captive. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre? You come back and find a burnt city, not knowing if your family is alive or dead, but they're gone and you'll probably never see them again. We don't know what sorrow is. Our modern, people do. People in this world do know sorrow. But so much of us, our sadness is so pathetically unimportant. Her own feet shall carry her far off. There's always that ironic part. Your own feet will carry you. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't want to do, you know. Like it says, when you were, like he said to Peter, Jesus said, when you were young, you went about where you wanted to go. And when you're old, they're going to lead you where you don't want to go. You're going to be led. Because old men sometimes are led, but not always as they please. And sometimes it gets to the point where you don't have a choice. Because you're too weak. You're at the mercy of others. So we had taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth. They're honored men. Their merchants are they're so wealthy, so powerful, they're like royalty. Like princes, inheritors of wealth and kingdoms. Living in that level of luxury. When you read about Tyre in like Ezekiel, there is just so much beauty, ornamentation, and beauty, ornamentation, and the word for valuable. I'm trying to find. I can't remember. And I don't want to say value. It sounds weird, but in richness, luxury in her, just all the luxuriant trappings of a well-appointed and wealthy city are obvious in Ezekiel, when it talks about the Prince of Tyre and all the gemstones and all this other things that, and all the, that comes from being wealthy and being the merchant city, the crowning city, implying that, this is the city that gives kings, that makes kings, the kingmaker. Because having the support of Tyre and the Phoenician merchants can be a huge advantage if you're making war in the Mediterranean. If they control the Mediterranean, if they're very strong in the sea, in trading and stuff. Whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth. They're honored in the earth. It doesn't necessarily mean they're honorable, but they're to the earth, they are the men of honor. We honor, in this day, men of wealth are held in high esteem. We hate them, but they also are exalted. A man who's rich, if he wants to be president, they take it seriously. And I mean, like when, what's his name? Bloomberg ran. He'd been mayor of New York, but if someone's got that much money, how can you not pay attention to them? They're a serious human. They know how to get the gold together. It's not to be snuffed at. As far as there's a lot of power in that. There's wickedness in it also. There's still power. There's power to be able to take all that wealth. Though with God's power, I can smash it. I can make your wealth into nothing. Not at my own will, but at God's command. You can watch it all. I don't mean just like, I just mean like so the gold can be worthless. By God's power, we can make you hate your wealth. As it says in Isaiah, they will cast their gold and their silver to the moles and the bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks and the tops of the ragged rocks, to hide there and cry unto them, to say, fall on us and hide us from him. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who should be able to stand? It's kind of a combination of several things, but that's sentiment. The wealth will not protect them in the day of the Lord. But there's not to say that there isn't something, that they've been given a power in the world and a responsibility. As Paul said, let them that have wealth learn to distribute, which is not an easy thing. Because people are attached to their wealth. They work and they get wealth. And, you don't always get wealth from working. I do a lot of work that doesn't get me wealthy. I would that it did, to tell you the truth. But I try to be content that it does not. Well, there's something. I'm not talking about like Bible studies, by the way. But I'm not talking about this. Like I want to get rich. But there are things I do that sometimes I'm like, yeah, I wish I could, for the amount of effort I put into it, I wish I could get the value out of it. But the Lord sees all our struggles and knows and can, and will reward our efforts in due time, especially the efforts we make on His behalf according to His will, according to the gifts He's given us to use them to bless others, to bless others, and to bless ourselves. I mean, I want to bless myself too. I want to do good things that make me blessed. Traffickers. It's one who traffics merchandise, one who brings to and fro merchandise. We usually think of traffickers as sex traffickers. That's the only time I ever heard that word, or drug traffickers, right? But trafficking isn't always like a negative connotation, but it does have a bit in English, doesn't it? Traffickers. The Lord of hosts who purposed it? Well, we know all along. The Lord of hosts has purposed it to stain the pride of all glory, and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the earth. The things of the earth honors God wants to bring into contempt. The pride of the earth, the glory of our pride. The pride of our, the glory, the things we glory in and have pride in, He will stain. Like ruin. That's the implication, like it's ruined. Like when you have someone like taking a painting and just sloshing it with paint, a bucket of paint, like mink coats. Like they take the mink coats and they throw the paint on them to ruin them, right? I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying it's like there's the staining. You know what I mean? A staining. We talked about that. When I talked about the beauty of the women of Zion, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go and making it tinkling with their feet. And He said, therefore He will smite with a scab the crown of the head. And there would be a scar, a burning, a branding instead of beauty. He would replace their beauty with branding. That's the thing. It's like, and here it's like, the mark of the beast will become a stain. During the reign of Antichrist, the mark of the beast is going to be like the best thing ever. I mean, believe me, it's not going to seem like the mark of the beast. You must take the mark. Ah! They're going to be like, why wouldn't you want them? What's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you want everybody's dying to get it. Everybody's dying to show their allegiance to God. What you don't believe in the Messiah who's arrived? They won't be able to, their minds will be blown. They'll be like, what? You don't believe? They won't even know what to do at first. And then as you're walking away, they'll be like, we should call the cops. I mean, whatever. Or the angel police, or I don't know, whatever. They won't, and it's not going to be like, they'll be like, because they're going to glory in it. They're going to have pride in it. When I talk to people who I disagree with fundamentally about finance, fundamentally about the nature of life, they are not ashamed of the way they look at life. They tell me, oh no, I'm old school. I believe in this. I believe in that. I'm like, well, you don't believe in the Lord, do you? They'll deny that part. They say, oh no, I believe in God. Yeah, I know. I guess you kind of believe. I mean, there's plenty of people who think, oh, there's probably something more going on here. They don't believe in anything specific. I can understand why. It's hard to believe in anything specific because there's so many different things people tell you. And what do you know about God? Even if I go to the Bible, it's hard to interpret. It's not always easy to figure out what the whole book, it's a book, there's all these books in there. It's not even obvious which parts I need to take most, because I'll tell you, like, oh, this part's done away with and that's okay. And why shouldn't I make an animal sacrifice? Why not? Well, it says in the Old Testament to do it. It's like, you can't just open the Bible anywhere and just start having Christianity. You literally can't do that. I can't just open to Leviticus and I'll start my Christian walk. It just doesn't work like that. We should glory in the Lord. Not in our pride, the things we've done, the works of our hands. The things our fingers have made. That's why they are not ashamed of glorying in the work of their hands. You know, they think they have it coming. And it's like, I earned it. And I said, comparison to me, like your money, you earned it. I didn't. Okay, and I'm not covet. The thing is, when you start preaching about this, people think you're coveting their money. But as everyone who watches this thing knows, there is no plea for money. In fact, it is currently impossible to donate money to me. You know what I mean? If like, try. You know what I mean? Pretty much. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's like I've made it extremely difficult. I got rid of the old way. I'm done with that. I'm done. Maybe something else will open up in the future, but for now, there's no avenue. I just don't want it. I told the Lord, I'm like, here, I'm not gonna take that. So good luck. Because sometimes I'm sorry, because sometimes I just feel like I want the Lord. I do like the Lord to speak clearly to me. I do. And if I have to suffer first to get that, then sometimes I'll just let myself suffer. Because I don't know what I'm doing, and I need help. That's why. And so, Lord, help me. And I will wait on the Lord to get my help, because there's no one else who's going to give it to me. If we glory in the Lord, we won't be ashamed. I mean, if we have our service of God, you know what I mean? We don't have to be ashamed of what we glory in. But we trust in uncertain riches, merchandise, and all that stuff. I don't covet people's stuff, right? But when you tell them, hey, they feel like, hey, that's not how you should live your life, pursuing wealth like that. They act like you're lazy. You know what I mean? It's like, well, because I'm working and not getting paid, I guess I'm stupid. I mean, maybe that's the case. It's like, some people are just 100% transactional. They never do anything for anybody else. It's always a trade. If they do something for someone else, it's to get something later, There's not a lot of giving spirit among some people. And not that I'm looking for it. I'm not looking for nothing. I'm just saying. Where's your pride? All I've done, all I've accomplished. Well, you may find your pride stained, and all the things you put your glory in passing away. I guarantee it, actually. I was saying the parable of the bigger barns, building bigger barns. The rich man, he sat there and he worried about his stuff, and he built bigger barns, and he thought, I finally have security. Oh, so nice to have security. And then he died that night. He knew he was going to die. He was probably so busy building bigger barns that he'd never bothered to love his family. And died alone. And then they got his stuff, and they were probably glad he was gone, because finally he stopped being a burden to them. And so much is done in life trying to avoid lies. You know what I mean? People say they do things because of lies. And if you know what I mean, I do this because that. Because I am afraid of this, or because I don't want that to happen. It's not true. Or they use lies to justify things that they do purely for selfish and greedy reasons. No, I pursue money because that's what I really care about. We all need money. We all need to work. We all need to support ourselves. But I'll tell you what, if you focus on it to the exclusion of other things, of your family, like your children. It's like, what was the first thing I said about today was, when people tell me they can't homeschool their kid, and in this society, the reason you can send to school, I don't want to guilt trip people, because I know it's very hard. But here's the thing is, and some people can't, it's not just hard, it's literally impossible. I mean, it's like, I downsized my life to be able to do this. And it's hard. You know what I mean? It's hard. You got to downsize your life. You got to downsize it and set your expectations lower. Some people don't want to do that. And so they keep their expectations. Like, my wife and I both have to have a new car every couple of years. You know, it's just what people do. Not me. I'm not talking about me. I just take people's old cars when they are done with them and try to keep them running. You know? But some people live like that. Every couple of years they get a new car. They always have the night. They replace old TVs with new ones, even though the TV isn't broken. They do a lot of other things. You know, they're focused on their retirement, their money. You know, and the kids, it's like, well, they trust the school. Well, the thing is, you got to be involved in your kid's life for one. But even in this day and age, I don't care how involved you are in your kid's life. I don't care how involved you are in your kid's life. The times we're living now have become very perilous, as things are rapidly spinning out of control as far as in the realm of children. When they start, you know, the fact that, you know, that they even allow parents to approve giving their children hormones to essentially experiment on their bodies. Not experiment, but you know, in a sense, but like, I mean, because if you notice, have you ever heard of the Isle of Dr. Moreau, where he was changing human beings into animals and stuff like that with his science? And you know, it makes me think of that. It's like we are creating abominations, and they are abominations. That's an abomination. It's like, you know, it is an abomination against nature, unfortunately. So is a lying tongue, by the way. Not against nature, but against God. A lying tongue is an abomination. So when I say that, understand it's like, that's not as heavy as it might sound. It is heavy, because lying, I mean, when I talk about it, I do have a song called Hell is the Place I'm working on, and hell is the place where traitors, liars, adulterers, and unbelievers dwell. So, I mean, when I say that experimenting on children's bodies and transforming them from one gender to the other is, what do I call it? Evil? I didn't call it evil or wicked. I call it abomination. It is abominable. It's an abominable thing to do. It is in the realm of thing like laying with beasts, except publicly so. Right? Just quite frankly. And when you have schools that are like, when the attitude is like that for your own child, they could start, for your own child's sake, you know what I mean? Quote unquote, their assessment, their judgment. And I see that these people are wacky. Mentally, they have bizarre ideas. And people who don't believe in fathers and mothers and just weird, you know, it's like their only purpose is to destroy. I almost feel like the human species is coming to a point where, like, I guess this is the part where we all kill each other. That must have, when the population gets too big, you know, I love, there's you know, you see those TED Talks. There's this one guy, Hans Rosling, who did a TED Talk about how eventually the population problem will be solved. And he showed with mathematics and statistics how, like, basically the Earth is going to top out at about 8 billion people, and as trends were going with prosperity and stuff, and that's where it'll end. Unfortunately, things like the pandemic interfere with that badly, especially the responses. We send people back into poverty. There'll be soaring rates of illegitimacy and stuff from all that because of the poverty in those countries. You know, poverty leads to a lot of children, oddly and weirdly. I mean, because you'd think people would be prosperous and they'd be like, let's have a lot of kids. You know, but they don't. People get more money, they become more selfish. The richer you are, the fewer children you have. And that's what he observed, Rosling. The richer people are, and as people get more richer, as the world becomes more prosperous, there'll just be less kids in it. And the population problem is solved. And he was right. But he missed something. That at a certain point, human society takes an ugly turn, and we turn on each other and eat each other. And I think that's what actually eventually happens. So if it's not the end of the world, it's the end of this world. As far as I think that this civilization may be coming to an end. And it doesn't mean America won't still be here in 100 years. It just means that whatever was going on could be coming to an end. And hopefully it's not too bad an end. And hopefully we're all still standing here out the other side. There's something's going on. There is a fight. I know because I'm participating in it. You know, when God calls me like that, to me that's a big deal. Because to me, it's I don't have to know God's voice all the time. I don't have to know He's speaking to me specifically. Wow, hour and 15 minutes. Well, we're picking it up with verse 10. But I just love this chapter. I like all this. Bringing to contempt what they honor. You know. But when God gives inspiration in a certain time, that's all I need. When I see myself inspired, to me that's like God's at work. Because He's never had me doing things like that. I've always just quietly making scripture songs and doing my Bible study. When I'm screaming at the world, that bothers me because I don't usually do that. And if God causes me to do that, that's not something I willingly do. You know what I mean? I don't. I don't like to publicly make a spectacle of anything. Anyways. So, thanks for joining me this study. We were a bit over. It's whatever. You know, love it. Myself, love to talk about the scriptures, love to meditate on these ideas, love to think about the Lord and my own service. And if anything you can learn from my own meditations, then God be praised. I'm happy if you could learn something from it. So we'll be back tomorrow. Let's pick it up at verse, whatever I said we would pick it up. Thanks for joining me. And until then.
And by great waters, the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river is her revenue. And she is the mart of nations. Be thou ashamed, O Sidon, for the sea hath spoken. Even the strength of the sea is saying, I travail not, no bring forth children. Up young men, nor bring up virgins. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained.